Let's start with the Democrats and whether it was smart to tighten restrictions on abortion in order to get that health care bill through the House. Nancy Keenan's president of NARAL and the America Foundation, New America Foundation's Peter Barnard joins us from the Daily Beast. Peter, let's start with you. You had an interesting column because nobody else is saying this. What is your point about this amendment last week on abortion rights, which restricted abortion rights in order to get those more conservative Democrats to support health care? What did you make of that?
My point is that big tents are really ugly things. Democrats think back to the nice parts of the 1930s through 1960s when they passed all of the social safety net legislation. What they don't remember is they did it with support of a lot of really reactionary, even racist people. All of these culturally conservative Democrats who voted yes are the product of the success of the Democratic Party in running culturally conservative candidates who can win in red districts. If you want these people in the party, you're going to get the party bigger, but you're going to have to accept that they're not going to be with you on some of the cultural issues.
Is that a good thing?
It's better than where the Republicans are, which is getting smaller and purer and I think heading towards disaster.
Well, I guess it depends whose ox is gored, doesn't it, Nancy Keenan?
That's
in your case, you're the ox.
Yeah.
And you don't like being gored.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with that premise. I mean, let's take what's happened across the country. Let's take the West. Look at how many pro-choice Democrats were elected these last couple of cycles. The John Testers, the Mitchells in Arizona. So we've had pro-choice Democrats win in some pretty conservative red states. So, and in the Midwest as well. So the point is that the party is big, reflective of the country, but don't assume that because the country is more conservative in some areas that pro-choice people can't be elected.
Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, is pretty smart, right?
Very smart.
Okay, she decided last week she had to make a compromise. To get that health bill passed through the House this time, she basically allowed that language in there that said you can't participate in the exchanges, you can't get a subsidy if the insurance policy includes abortion coverage, right? She made that call.
She made that call.
Okay, and you wouldn't have made that call.
Well, you know, I think I've been in politics a long time, and you count every vote. And she had to make the call for making sure that that bill passed. I don't like that the Stupak language was in that, but the fight isn't over. And I think that's the point. You have to keep going. It's a big process. This is the beginning. We're going to go to the Senate now. The fight continues.
You're being so reasonable. No, I didn't count on that because I thought you'd be pure today. I thought you would say the most important issue for Democrats is choice, being from NARAL, Pro-Choice America, the fact that your group is founded on that idea, that believes in it fundamentally as a fundamental right. How can you compromise?
Listen, we did.
You know what I'm doing here? I'm making up a fight here.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get you to say what you really believe, which is if this bill comes for final passage and you're talking to your members, you're saying to them, or your Congress people who are loyal to you, you're saying don't vote for that amendment again.
You're exactly right. Let me tell you that there was a compromise in the original bill that basically said there is no federal funding for abortion in the original bill. The Stupak amendment went much, much further than that. It basically eliminated the status quo. So you know, you're counting votes late at night. Fact of the matter is now we've got to remove that language. That's my bottom line. The Stupak language cannot be
okay, here we go. You're arguing the fog of war late at night. What's the implication? That they didn't really know what they were doing?
I think that there were members of Congress that felt that they were not given the
Nancy Pelosi didn't know what she was doing.
No, Nancy Pelosi knew what she was doing, and she understood the consequences.
Peter Barnard, back to you, sir. It seems to me that the question is, in the end, they're going to have to decide on some kind of compromise. You may not like the compromise. Somebody else may like it. Somebody else may not like it. But in the end, if they're going to get a health care bill, what? What kind of compromises? No public option? Some vague kind of trigger? Abortion rights restricted in some way, maybe not with regard to the exchanges, but certainly with regard to the subsidies, things like that. Your thoughts?
Yeah, you're not even mentioning some of the really ugly stuff on illegal immigrants not being able to access health care that they're having to swallow. I mean, this is my point. This is ugly, but I think it's a sign of the Democratic Party's realism. Look, I hope you guys win. I really do. I hope you get rid of Stupak. I hope we keep the status quo. I'd love to get rid of the Hyde Amendment altogether.
You're turning this into an eat your spinach thing for Democrats.
But right? think about the consequences of winning, though, Chris. This is something Democrats have been, progressives have been wanting for 100 years. This is so big that it's worth swallowing the tough stuff that, like FDR and Franklin Roosevelt.
Okay, here's the question. What's the Democratic Party stand for? Because you argue the Democratic Party stands for economic opportunity for people in this country. In fact, some kind of equalization at the bottom, so the people at the bottom don't get tread down. Some kind of, you know, mixed capitalism, right? Social democracy.
Yes,
that's the main goal of the party. You would argue the main goal is rights for women, right?
Well, yes, absolutely. And I think
you would say that's a more important goal than economic opportunity or health care.
I think that you don't have to give up one for the other. You don't have to give up one for the other.
To choose.
To some degree, I think you do.
I don't think you do.
Sadly.
But isn't politics trade-offs?
At some times, but I believe that when we know that there are pro-choice elected officials across this country that can win, they can do the economic justice
Okay, are you
issues.
willing to compromise on this, or are you sticking to your guns?
I'm sticking to my guns on this.
Well, then why should the other side compromise? Why should the pro-life compromise? This is a classic case of politics. You say you're going to be pure on this. You're not going to give in on this issue of the Stupak Amendment, but you expect the pro-life people on the other side to buckle and go along with the party.
Let's be clear here. The Capps Amendment, the Capps compromise was the compromise. We came to the table and said...
Capps is pro-choice. She's not a compromise.
But the point was that they wanted to make sure that there were no federal dollars for abortion coverage. The Capps compromise said no federal dollars will pay for abortion in this country.
But for the subsidies.
No, well, that's a whole other issue in the exchange. But right now...
No, the subsidies are in there. And the president the other day said no subsidies for abortion.
Chris, and that's the truth. Because you can have a subsidy that would not pay for the abortion coverage, the private money would. So the point here is the compromise was the Capps compromise. And the other side went further. They said we wanted more than that. And they kept moving the goal line. They kept moving the goal line.
I think the larger question is, I say this is someone who's pro-choice, are pro-choice people winning the argument out there in the country? On gay rights, you can see that it's moving in the progressive direction. Slowly, not as fast as I'd like. On abortion, the public opinion is not moving in the pro-choice direction.
Why not?
I don't know what the answer is. That maybe it's because people take it for granted. They don't remember a world where abortion was. Maybe it's because of the technology. You can see the ultrasounds. For whatever reason, that's the larger problem.
So what's your point with regard to Nancy Keenan?
Is if you want a Democratic Party that can pass social safety net and be pro-choice, you have to do better in winning the public argument than I think progressives have done.
I think we've won the argument. I think most people are pro-choice. I believe that they know very clearly that they don't want politicians in this decision. They believe it is best made with a woman,
then why are you subsidizing it?
Chris, we're not subsidizing. Those monies are subsidizing health care, but the private money. So let's go into the exchange.
Let me point out this. There are people in this country who are totally pro-choice like yourself. There are people who are pro-life who say, no way, Jose. Then there are people in the middle that say, okay, it's really one person's decision in the end. After all the counseling and deliberative consent and all that stuff, in the end, somebody has to make up their mind. I say it's the individual, not the government. Okay, but that person can also say, I want this decision to be totally neutral. I don't want the government to spend a nickel in subsidizing it, not a nickel. And those people are people like Vice President Joe Biden. Okay, they're not weird people. Okay, that's what I'm saying.
That's right. And Chris, let's go to the Catholic bishops for a minute and Catholic hospitals.
Let's not. Because I said the other night they shouldn't have been on Capitol Hill. Then I found out they weren't actually on Capitol Hill, but they may have been. Their people were on Capitol Hill.
Let's make this case here. The Catholic charity, Catholic hospitals receive federal money, federal subsidies. At the same time, they do with those federal subsidies in their hospitals, with Medicaid, Medicare, they take care of those patients. They do their religious activity with private money. They keep it separate. They're doing it right now. And yet, what the argument here is that the healthcare system couldn't keep those money separate. The Capps compromise kept the money separate. Women could go into that exchange, be subsidized, but only their private money would cover abortion care. And that's the point here. The money was kept separate. There is no dollars, no federal dollars under the Capps compromise used for abortion coverage.
The problem with that is money is fungible. And in the case of an insurance policy, some policy that covered abortion procedures and one that didn't cover it, you would say should cost the same. But they cost different because one would cover an additional procedure. So clearly there's a subsidy involved.
But there's a hypocrisy here. There's hypocrisy here. The hypocrisy here that why can the Catholic hospitals keep it separate, but a healthcare system
Nancy, could you agree with me if I was right and you were wrong? You're not allowed to, as head of NARAL, to agree with me, are you?
Well, hey, I think we're right here.
You know what H.L. Mencken once said? Never argue with somebody whose job depends on not being convinced. You are pro-choice, fair enough.
You're not pro-choice?
This isn't a point for me to make this issue. You know, anyway, we're getting nowhere. Where's this going to end up?
I think
Are we going to get a health care bill this year?
Yes, we will, and I think that more calm demeanor in the Senate.
Is there a compromise yet to be reached that hasn't been reached yet? Or you say it's already behind us?
No. I think that there will be a compromise.
I mean, the good news is that everyone rhetorically says they just want to keep the status quo. So if you listen to the rhetoric, everyone actually agrees. The question is, can you operationalize that, given that government is going to get more involved in providing health care than it was before?